the merciless darkness of a forgotten road, the roar of a luxury car's engine tore through the silence. At the wheel was a millionaire whose fortune was as vast as his indifference. A dry thud, almost imperceptible to his calculating mind. And there, on the edge of the icy asphalt, lay his own mother and the small dog that was her only comfort. Without a shred of remorse, he witnessed the scene, the elderly woman frail and disoriented, and the injured animal both at the mercy of fate. Nature will take care of it, he thought, with the coldness of someone discarding a broken object. He sped up, leaving them behind, abandoned to the night and the biting cold. But the road which had witnessed human cruelty was about to witness an unexpected guardianship. From the dense shadows of the forest, an imposing lion emerged, not with the ferocity of a predator, but with the dignity of a guardian. It approached, and with a gesture that defied all logic, lay down between the injured mother and her loyal dog, shielding them from the lurking danger. Its massive, warm body became a living shield, a silent promise of protection until help could finally arrive. That night, the icy asphalt and impenetrable darkness became the stage for a silent miracle. The mother, whose fragile body was now a map of pain, felt consciousness return in slow, excruciating waves. Every fiber of her being screamed. The cold bit at her skin, but there was something more. An unexpected warmth, dense and pulsating, radiated beside her. Her eyes, blurred by pain and shock, tried to focus on the massive shadow that moved softly, breathing deep and rhythmically. It wasn't the warmth of the asphalt, nor that of a blanket. It was the warmth of a life. Panic, an icy wave threatening to drown her, began to rise. She couldn't move, but her mind, though confused, registered the presence. A strong, wild scent filled her nostrils, a smell of earth, of forest, of something primal and powerful. And then her vision cleared enough for reality to strike her with the force of lightning. Beside her, lying down, head raised and eyes fixed on the darkness ahead, was a lion. A lion with an imposing mane, whose muscles rippled softly beneath its golden skin. The terror should have been absolute, paralyzing, but in some inexplicable way, it wasn't. There was a strange dignity in the animal's posture, a stillness that transcended the inherent ferocity of its species. It didn't look at her. Its eyes, glowing with an amber light in the gloom, were fixed on the road, on the forest, on the invisible dangers the night held. And between her and the lion's massive body lay little Toby, her faithful companion, whimpering softly. Injured and trembling, the lion was there, not as a predator, but as a barrier, a living shield. The elderly woman's mind, already so weakened by physical pain and her son's betrayal, struggled to process the scene. Her own flesh and blood, her firstborn, had abandoned her to the brink of death, along with her only comfort. And now, a king of the jungle, a wild animal, offered protection. The irony was brutal, the role reversal shocking. The warmth of the lion's body was a balm against the biting cold of the night, a promise of life amidst desolation. She felt the rough, warm fur against her skin, a texture that should inspire fear, but which, at that moment, was her only source of comfort. Each of the lion's breaths was deep and calm, a sound that echoed in her injured chest, almost like a shared heartbeat. Toby, despite the pain, seemed to sense the protective presence. His whimpers subsided, and he nestled even closer to the lion's warmth, seeking refuge. The mother observed the dog's small, vulnerable body, and a new wave of despair washed over her. He was bleeding, and she could do nothing. But the lion was there. Hours dragged on, each minute an eternity. The night sky, once an impenetrable veil, began to subtly lighten on the horizon, announcing the arrival of a cold and uncertain dawn. The lion didn't move. Its vigilance was unwavering, its eyes scanning the dark landscape, alert to any sound, any movement. For the mother, The animal's presence was a living paradox, terrifying in its essence, yet incredibly comforting in its action. She felt the lion's brute force, the power contained in every muscle, and knew that if it wished, her life and Toby's would end in an instant. Yet it remained, a golden guardian against the darkness and abandonment. The fear of other wild animals, of thieves, of any danger the night might bring, was mitigated by the lion's presence. No one would dare approach, but what about help? Would it come? Would anyone notice her absence? Her son, in his calculating coldness, wouldn't even care. Bitterness was a metallic taste in her mouth, almost as strong as the smell of blood and earth. But the lion. It was her only hope, the only barrier between life and death, between human cruelty and the unexpected compassion of the animal kingdom. The faint light of dawn began to paint the sky with shades of grey and pale pink, revealing the contours of the deserted road, of the dense forest. The lion, still in its guarding position, seemed even more majestic under the nascent light. Its eyes, once amber in the darkness, now reflected the light with a golden gleam. The mother felt a thread of hope, faint but real. Perhaps, just perhaps, help was on its way. Perhaps someone would find her. And when they did, what would they say upon seeing a lion protecting an elderly woman and her injured dog? The story would be unbelievable, a dark fairy tale, but with a touch of wild magic. The tension remained with every distant sound, every shadow moving at the periphery of her vision. But the lion's presence, the warmth of its body, the silent promise of its guard, was the anchor that kept her clinging to life, waiting, against all odds, for the miracle to complete itself. The faint light of dawn, once a distant promise, now spread across the sky, painting the horizon with pearly grey and a pale pink that seemed almost unreal. With each passing minute, the darkness receded, revealing the contours of the deserted road, of the dense forest bordering the asphalt, and the surreal scene unfolding at the roadside. The mother, still immobilized by pain and shock, observed the transition, each ray of light a cruel reminder of her vulnerability. The lion, once an imposing silhouette in the gloom, now revealed itself in all its glory and contained ferocity. Its mane, a crown of gold and copper, seemed to absorb the nascent light, radiating a wild glow. The powerful muscles beneath its golden skin were visible, contracting softly with each deep, constant breath. It hadn't moved an inch. Its eyes, once amber in the darkness, now reflected the rising sun with a golden gleam, fixed on the road ahead, on the forest, on anything that might pose a threat. The morning chill still bit, but the warmth of the lion's body, a living furnace, continued to be her only refuge against hypothermia. The mother felt the rough, warm fur against her exposed skin, a texture that should inspire dread, but which somehow had become her sole source of comfort. Toby, the small dog, still whimpered softly, but his tremors had lessened, nestled between the elderly woman's leg and the feline's massive flank. The lion's rhythmic breathing was the only constant sound, a wild heartbeat that seemed to synchronize with her own, weak and irregular. The elderly woman's mind, despite the confusion and pain, began to clear. The reality of her abandonment was a blow more painful than any fracture in her body. Her own son, the man she had raised, loved, and sacrificed so much for, had left her to die. Bitterness was a poison spreading through her veins, almost as potent as the smell of blood and earth surrounding her. And in brutal contrast, there was the lion, a wild animal, a born predator who had chosen, for some incomprehensible reason, to be her guardian. The irony was a heavy burden. Nature, which her son thought would take care of them, was indeed taking care, but not in the way he had imagined. Not with the cold indifference of death, but with the unexpected and majestic protection of a king of the jungle. It was a dark miracle, an inverted fairy tale, where the beast became the hero and the man, the monster. Hours dragged on, each minute an eternity of pain and waiting. The sun slowly climbed, and with it, hope and despair battled for supremacy. At every distant sound, the mother held her breath. Was it a car? Help? Or just the wind, the rustling of leaves, a bird's call? The lion, however, remained impassive, its vigilance unwavering. It showed no impatience, no fatigue, just a silent, almost ancestral determination. Suddenly, a sound, distant yet unmistakable, the hum of an engine, not the deafening roar of a truck, but the softer purr of a passenger car. The mother's heart pounded, a painful beat in her injured chest. She tried to move, to cry out, but only a weak moan escaped her parched lips. Her eyes turned to the lion, which had stiffened its posture. Its ears twitched, catching the sound with a precision that the human did not possess. The lion raised its head a little higher, its golden eyes fixed on the distant curve of the road. There was a palpable tension in its muscles, a readiness that was not for attack but for alert. It didn't roar, didn't move away. It simply remained, a living monument of protection. The mother felt a new kind of fear. What if the approaching car brought more danger? What if the occupants of the vehicle were startled by the lion and abandoned them again? Or worse, tried to attack it? The lion's proximity, which had once been her comfort, now became a double-edged sword. It was her salvation, but also an insurmountable obstacle for anyone trying to approach without understanding the situation. The elderly woman's mind raced, imagining terrible scenarios. No one would believe her story. They would see a wild lion and react with panic. The engine sound grew louder, more distinct. A dark spot appeared on the road, growing rapidly. It was a car, no doubt. The mother closed her eyes for an instant, praying that it was help, praying that the lion wouldn't be misunderstood, praying that after everything she and Toby could survive. When she opened her eyes again, the car was closer. She could distinguish its dark color, the gleam of its windshield under the rising sun. The lion, still in its guarding position, seemed even more imposing, its wild presence a silent challenge to the approaching civilization. The tension was almost unbearable. What would happen now? What would the lion do? And what would the car's occupants do upon encountering the most improbable scene of their lives? The lives of the mother and Toby hung by a thread between the cruelty of a son and the incomprehensible majesty of a king of the jungle, while the world of men approached, oblivious to the silent miracle unfolding on the edge of that forgotten road. The mother felt a new kind of fear. What if the approaching car brought more danger? What if the occupants of the vehicle were startled by the lion and abandoned them again, or worse, tried to attack it? The lion's proximity, which had once been her comfort, now became a double-edged sword. It was her salvation, but also an insurmountable obstacle for anyone trying to approach without understanding the situation. The elderly woman's mind raced, imagining terrible scenarios. No one would believe her story. They would see a wild lion and react with panic. The tension was almost unbearable. What would happen now? What would the lion do? And what would the car's occupants do upon encountering the most improbable scene of their lives? The lives of the mother and Toby hung by a thread between the cruelty of a son and the incomprehensible majesty of a king of the jungle, while the world of men approached, oblivious to the silent miracle unfolding on the edge of that forgotten road. The car, a black SUV, slowed abruptly as it approached the curve. Its headlights, still on in the morning twilight, swept the scene, revealing the fallen elderly woman, the small injured dog, and, at the center of it all, the colossal figure of the lion. Brakes screeched, and the vehicle skidded slightly before stopping about 20 meters away. A cloud of dust rose and hung in the air, dense and yellowish, like a curtain refusing to fall. Two men got out of the car, one older, with grey hair and glasses, and another younger, with a cell phone in his hand. Both were paralyzed, mouths agape, eyes wide. The silence that followed the car's stop was almost more terrifying than the engine's roar. It was a silence laden with shock, disbelief, primal fear. The lion didn't move. Its golden eyes, previously fixed on the road, were now turned towards the newcomers, without a hint of aggression, but with unquestionable authority. It was the boundary. The mother tried to raise her hand, to signal, but the pain was excruciating. Only a hoarse groan managed to escape. Toby, sensing the new presence, began to tremble again, nestling deeper into the lion's fur. The men in the SUV were in a dilemma. The scene was clear, an injured woman, a hurt dog. But the Guardian was a lion, a real, wild, imposing lion, which seemed to have no intention of moving away. The older man, who appeared to be the driver, finally found his voice, though it came out as an incredulous whisper. "But what? What is that? A lion! Here!" The younger man, still holding his cell phone, seemed to be recording, but his hand trembled so much that the image must have been unstable. I don't know, Dad. It's real. It's a real lion." Neither of them dared to take a step forward. The distance between civilization and wilderness was short, but impassable. The mother observed their faces, the mixture of horror and fascination. She knew they wanted to help, but the instinct for self-preservation was stronger. Who would risk approaching such a powerful predator? The irony was cruel. Help had arrived, but it was powerless before the lion's unexpected protection. The lion, as if understanding their hesitation, let out a low growl, almost a murmur, but one that echoed down the deserted road, making the men take a step back. It wasn't an attacking growl, but a warning, a sonic barrier. It didn't want them to approach, not yet. It was the Guardian, and its guard was absolute. The mother felt a mix of gratitude and despair. The lion protected her, yes, but also isolated her. How would they save her if they couldn't get close? The sun was now higher, gilding the lion's mane and revealing the dried blood on the elderly woman's clothes and Toby's fur. The reality of the situation was brutal. The men in the car began to speak louder, tense voices, discussing what to do. The younger one was clearly in a panic, but the older one seemed to try to remain calm, though his eyes never left the lion for a second. "We have to call someone, Dad. The police, the fire department, the zoo, I don't know. I'm already calling, but what are we going to say? There's an injured old lady and a dog, but a lion is protecting them and won't let anyone get close." The older man's voice was laden with disbelief and frustration. The mother, with the last shred of her strength, tried again. A guttural sound, almost a lament, escaped her throat. She wanted to scream, "Don't hurt him, he's protecting us!" But the words dissolved into pain and exhaustion. The lion's head turned slightly towards her, its golden eyes meeting hers for an instant, as if it understood. And then it refocused its gaze on the men, a golden living wall between danger and salvation. The tension was a rope stretched to its maximum, about to snap. The world of men and the wild kingdom were at a standoff, and the lives of the elderly woman and her dog depended on how this impasse would be resolved. The tense silence was broken by the shrill sound of a cell phone being dialed, followed by the trembling voice of the younger man. "Hello? Emergency? Yes, it's an emergency. We're on Serra Road, just after the Rio Seco curve. There's an injured woman and a dog, but there's a lion, a real lion, protecting them." The incredulity in the operator's voice on the other end of the line was almost audible even from a distance, a mix of confusion and suspicion. "A lion, sir? Are you sure? Wouldn't it be a large dog or—" The young man, desperate, gestured to his father, who was trying to calm him. No, it's a lion. I swear, a huge mane, golden eyes. It won't let anyone get close. The woman is down, she looks very hurt. And the dog, too. The mother, observing the scene from her improvised bed of earth and blood, felt helplessness corrode her last strengths. She wanted to scream, to explain, to beg them not to harm her guardian. But her voice was a thin thread, and pain, a thick veil that obscured her mind. Toby, sensing the agitation, pressed himself even closer against the lion's warm flank, a small tremor running through his injured body. The lion, for its part, did not avert its gaze from the men. Its posture was one of unwavering vigilance, every muscle tense, ready to react, but without a hint of gratuitous aggression. It was the personification of the barrier, the impassable line between vulnerability and the outside world. The older man, with his glasses slipping down his nose, took his son's cell phone. "Listen, I'm Dr. Almeida. I'm on my way to the city hospital. This is no joke. There's a seriously injured elderly woman and a large wild animal that for some reason is acting as her protector. We need specialized help, police, firefighters, and maybe someone from animal control or the zoo. But please come prepared. This animal doesn't seem hostile, but it is a lion." The authority in the doctor's voice, even if laden with shock, seemed to have a different effect. The line went silent for a moment, and then the operator's voice returned, more serious, promising to send teams. Time stretched, each second an eternity of uncertainty. The sun was already higher, bathing the scene in a golden light that ironically made everything even more surreal. The gleam in the lion's mane was almost mystical, and the dried blood on the mother's clothes and Toby's fur seemed even more vivid. The elderly woman's mind wandered between physical pain and emotional anguish. Her son, the man who had abandoned her, was a monster of flesh and blood. The lion, the wild beast, was her guardian angel. What kind of world was this, where human cruelty surpassed nature's ferocity? And now the world of men, with its sirens and weapons, was on its way to resolve the situation. She feared for the lion more than for herself. Minutes that felt like hours passed. Then the sound. First, distant, a high-pitched hum that grew rapidly. Sirens, 2, perhaps 3. The sound cut through the morning air, a premonition of the invasion to come. The mother's heart pounded again, a painful, irregular beat. Toby let out a louder whimper, and the lion, for the first time, moved slightly. Its head rose a little higher, its golden eyes fixed on the curve of the road from which the sounds came. A low growl, almost inaudible, vibrated in its chest, a warning note that seemed to resonate in the very earth. The men's black SUV moved back a little further, as if to make space for what was to come. Soon, 2 police vehicles and an animal rescue ambulance, with the logo of a wildlife center, appeared around the bend. Brakes screeched again, and the vehicles stopped at an even greater distance from the lion, forming a barrier of metal and flashing lights. Several uniformed figures jumped out of the cars, some police officers with weapons drawn, others with tranquilizer darts and nets. The scene was chaotic, a whirlwind of tense voices and hurried movements. "Stand back, maintain your distance," shouted a police officer, his voice amplified by a megaphone. "Do not approach the animal." The mother tried to raise her head, but pain overwhelmed her. She saw the faces of the police officers, the mix of caution and determination. They saw a lion, a danger, a wild animal that needed to be contained. They did not see the protector, the guardian, the miracle. The lion, however, remained motionless, a bronze statue under the rising sun. Its eyes, once calm, now seemed to gleam with greater intensity, reflecting the imminent threat. It did not retreat. It showed no fear, only unwavering vigilance, an ancestral determination to protect those under its guard. One of the officers, a robust man with a bulletproof vest and a rifle in hand, tried to approach cautiously, step by step. "Madam, are you all right? We can help," but we need the animal to move away." His voice was firm, but there was a perceptible tremor. The lion let out a more audible growl this time, a deep sound that made the ground vibrate and caused the officer to stop abruptly, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. The mother felt a growing despair. They didn't understand. They would hurt it. The lion was her only hope, and now it had become the target. She wanted to scream, "He's saving us! Don't attack him!" But the words were lost in a moan. Toby, sensing the tension, began to bark weakly, a sharp, frightened sound that mingled with the lion's growl and the men's voices. The animal control team, led by a middle-aged woman with a serious look and a tranquilizer dart, tried a different approach. "Madam, try to give us a sign. Is the lion injured? Is it aggressive?" She tried to remain calm, but her eyes never left the feline. The lion, as if understanding the question, turned its head slightly towards the mother, its golden eyes meeting hers for an instant. There was an intelligence, an understanding that transcended mere savagery. The mother, with superhuman effort, managed to raise her trembling hand and point to the lion, then to herself, and then to Toby. She tried to convey, "He protects us. Don't hurt him." But the message was lost in the confusion and panic. The armed men were ready to shoot. The animal control woman was ready to fire the dart. The lion was the wall, the guardian, and now the center of a dangerous standoff. The lives of the elderly woman and her dog, which had once hung by a thread between cruelty and majesty, were now suspended between incomprehension and the imminent violence of the world of men. What would happen when human patience ran out and the lion's determination was tested to its limit? The morning air, once pure and fresh, was now heavy with tension. The sirens, finally silenced, left a phantom hum in the elderly woman's ears, an echo of the invasion materializing before her eyes. She saw the uniforms, the weapons, the tranquilizer darts, all the apparatus of the civilized world, ready to confront the unusual, the inexplicable. And the inexplicable was her guardian, the lion. Dr. Almeida's black SUV and his son were a little further away, silent and complicit witnesses. The son, still pale, seemed petrified, his eyes fixed on the surreal scene. Dr. Almeida, in turn, observed with a mixture of fascination and horror. It was his mother there, injured, and a lion, a wild beast, was protecting her. The irony was a punch to the gut, stronger than any physical pain. He, the man of means, the son who had abandoned her, was powerless. The lion, the creature of the wild, was the only one acting. The rescue team organized itself. The animal control woman, Dr. Silva, an experienced veterinarian with years of working with big cats in sanctuaries, attempted a calmer approach. She raised her hands slowly and began to speak in a low, reassuring tone, as if addressing the lion itself. "Hello, boy. We're here to help. We don't want to hurt you. We just want to help the lady and the little dog." The lion, however, showed no sign of relaxation. Its golden eyes, now more alert than ever, swept over the group of humans, assessing every movement, every intention. A deep, continuous growl vibrated in its chest, a sound that was not of uncontrolled rage, but of an unwavering warning. It was the boundary, the line that could not be crossed. Toby, nestled against the lion's flank, trembled, but the warmth of the feline's body and the steadfastness of its presence were a strange and powerful comfort. The mother, feeling the urgency of the situation, gathered the last remnant of her strength. She tried again, with a hoarse moan, to point to the lion and then to the distant SUV where her son was. She wanted to say, "He is the good one, not my son. He saved us." But the words were just indistinct sounds, and the message distorted by the pain and panic of the observers. One of the police officers, impatient, whispered to Dr. Silva, "Doctor, we can't wait forever. The woman is losing a lot of blood. We need to act." He gestured with his weapon, a movement that did not go unnoticed by the lion. The feline's growl intensified, and it took a subtle step forward, an almost imperceptible movement, but one that made the police officers instinctively recoil. Dr. Silva, sensing the escalating tension, raised her hand to the police officer. "No, don't provoke it. It's in protection mode. Any abrupt movement could be interpreted as a threat." She tried again, this time with a softer voice, almost a song. "Lion, please, let us get close. The lady needs help. You are a good protector, but we need to take care of her." It seemed absurd talking to a lion as if it would understand, but there was something in the animal's eyes, a depth that went beyond instinct. It turned its head slightly, its eyes meeting Dr. Silva's for a brief moment. It wasn't a look of human comprehension, but of an ancestral intelligence, of a profound assessment. Dr. Almeida, observing from afar, felt a chill run down his spine. His mother, lying on the ground, seemed smaller and more fragile than ever. And the lion, majestic and imposing, was the only one protecting her. The scene was a cruel mirror of his own failure. He, the son, should have been there, but he was a stranger, a distant observer. Shame began to corrode him, a slow and bitter poison. Dr. Silva, with a plan in mind, began to move slowly, one step at a time, in a wide arc, trying not to approach directly, but to flank the lion. She had a tranquilizer dart in her hand, but her objective was not to use it immediately. She wanted to assess the animal, understand its body language. She knew that a lion in protection mode was a dangerous animal, but also that its aggressiveness was usually defensive, not offensive. The lion watched her, its golden eyes following every movement. When she approached a little closer, the growl became more guttural, and it subtly bared its teeth, a clear warning. She stopped, raising her hands again. All right, I understand." The mother, seeing Dr. Silva approach, felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this woman, with her calm voice and careful movements, could understand. She tried to raise her hand again, pointing to the lion, then to herself, and then to the SUV. "No, good." The words were an almost inaudible whisper, but the intention was clear in her gaze. The lion, as if responding to the elderly woman's despair, let out a low but powerful roar that made the ground tremble and the police officers recoil again, some raising their weapons. It was not an attacking roar, but a final warning, an impassable limit. The message was clear: do not approach. I am the guardian. Dr. Silva, though startled, perceived the nuance. The lion was not attacking, it was defending, but time was running out. The elderly woman's life hung by a thread, and the standoff seemed unbreakable. The sun was already high, and the heat began to be felt, adding another layer of discomfort and urgency to the situation. What would happen when human patience ran out, and the lion's determination was tested to its limit? The answer was about to be revealed, and the tense silence of the road awaited the next move. The lion's roar reverberated down the road, a primal thunder that not only made the ground tremble, but also shook the armed men's resolve. The police officers, who a moment before seemed ready for action, recoiled once more, their weapons still raised, but their expressions now tinged with a mixture of fear and respect. It was not a hunting roar, nor one of blind fury. It was a warning, an unwavering declaration of limits, the voice of nature itself defending its territory, or in this case, its protected ones. Dr. Silva, however, did not retreat. Her eyes, though alert, carried a spark of recognition. She had studied big cats for decades, and that roar, that posture, spoke a language few understood. The lion was not an aggressor, it was a guardian. But how to convince the others, those who saw only a wild threat, that this animal was salvation? The mother, feeling the vibration of the roar on the ground, opened her eyes with difficulty. Pain was a thick fog, but the lion's presence, its warm, living wall, was the only thing anchoring her. She saw the frightened faces of the police officers, Dr. Silva's tense determination, and, in the distance, the pale figure of her son, Dr. Almeida, watching from inside the SUV, a shadow of regret and powerlessness. She tried again, with an effort that drained her last reserves, to raise her hand. Her trembling finger pointed to the lion, then to herself, and then, with an almost imperceptible movement, to her son's car. Good. Her voice was a hoarse whisper, almost inaudible, but her eyes pleaded for understanding. Toby, the small terrier, sensing his owner's anguish, let out a weak bark, almost a whimper, nestling even closer against the lion's flank. The feline, in turn, lowered its head slightly, a gesture of silent comfort, before raising its gaze again to the humans, its golden eyes fixed on Dr. Silva. There was an expectation there, a non-verbal question. Dr. Silva interpreted the lion's gaze and the elderly woman's despair. She knew she had to act, and fast. The woman was losing a lot of blood. Time was an invisible enemy, more relentless than any lion. She raised her hands again in a gesture of peace and began to move, not in an arc but in a straight line, slow and deliberate, towards the lion and the mother. Every step was calculated, every movement, a silent prayer for the animal to understand. "I understand, boy," she murmured, her voice low and calm, almost a melody. "I understand you're protecting, but she needs help. Let us help her. You are a good protector. Let us take care of her." She spoke as if the lion were a patient, a sentient being, and not just a wild instinct. The police officers, shocked by Dr. Silva's audacity, hesitated. The commander, a man with a scarred face and short temper, was about to shout an order, but the scene was so surreal that he found himself paralyzed. A woman, unarmed, walking towards a lion that had just roared, talking to it as if it were a pet. The lion watched her, its muscles tense, ready to react. Its growl diminished to a deep murmur, like an idling engine, but its eyes did not waver. When Dr. Silva was a few meters away, she stopped. She could see the injury on the mother's leg, the dark blood staining the asphalt. She could see the tremor in Toby's body, and she could see the intelligence in the lion's eyes. "Madam," Dr. Silva said, her voice a little louder but still soft, "can you tell me where it hurts most? Is the lion injured?" The mother, with an almost superhuman effort, shook her head. No. She pointed to her own leg, then to the lion, and shook her head again. Good. Dr. Silva nodded. "He is good, I believe you. But we need him to move away a little so we can help you. Do you trust me?" The lion, as if understanding the conversation, let out a low sound. A type of moan that was not threatening but seemed to express deep reluctance. It turned its head to the mother, its golden eyes meeting hers. The mother, feeling the urgency, tried to force a smile. Go, she whispered to the lion, an almost imperceptible plea. Dr. Almeida, observing from afar, felt a knot in his throat. His mother, on the verge of death, was asking a lion to move away so she could receive help, and the lion, the wild beast, seemed to be considering the request. The shame that corroded him transformed into acute pain, a brutal realization of his own insignificance and cruelty. He, the man who had run over his mother, was now witnessing a miracle of animal compassion that shamed him to his very soul. Suddenly, the police commander, losing patience, stepped forward. "Doctor, we cannot risk any longer. The lady is in critical condition. If the animal doesn't move, we'll have to neutralize it." His voice was harsh, authoritative, and the sound of a gun being cocked echoed in the air. The lion, hearing the sound and the aggressive voice, reacted instantly. Its body tensed, and it let out a guttural growl, stronger than before, a clear and undeniable warning. It took a step back, not in retreat, but in a defensive maneuver, positioning itself even more protectively over the mother and Toby, its eyes fixed on the police officer. Dr. Silva knew that time had run out. The men's patience had expired. The lives of the elderly woman and the lion were now hanging by a thread, and the next move would be decisive. The morning air, previously just tense, now seemed electrified, charged with the imminence of a tragedy, or perhaps an even greater miracle. The sound of the gun being cocked resonated like a shot in the tense silence of the road, a chilling premonition of imminent violence. The lion's guttural roar, stronger and deeper than before, was not just a warning, but a silent declaration of war. A line in the sand that no human would dare cross without consequences. Its muscles tensed, every fiber of its majestic body pulsing with primal defensive energy. It did not retreat. Instead, it moved slightly, positioning itself even more protectively over the fragile figure of the mother and little Toby, its golden eyes fixed on the police officer, a gleam of defiance and wild fury in them. Dr. Silva felt an icy shiver run down her spine. That was the point of no return. The men's patience had run out, and the lives of the elderly woman and the lion were now hanging by a thread, swaying precariously over the abyss. She could feel the weight of the police officer's gazes on her, the palpable tension in the air, the imminence of a tragedy that could be avoided, but which seemed inevitable. "Commander, wait!" Dr. Silva exclaimed, her voice firm despite her growing panic. She raised her hands again, not just to the lion, but now also to the police officer. "He's not attacking, he's protecting. It's defensive behavior. If you shoot, he will react. And the lady, she won't survive the shock." The commander, a man whose face was marked by experience and frustration, hesitated for an instant. His eyes swept the scene, the injured woman, the small dog, the imposing lion, and Dr. Silva, a scientist who seemed to have lost her mind, arguing with a wild beast. Military logic dictated swift and decisive action. But there was something in Dr. Silva's determination and in the lion's own posture that made him doubt. "Doctor, we don't have time for animal behavior theories," the commander replied, his voice harsh. "The lady's life is at risk. We need to act." Meanwhile, the mother, feeling the vibration of the lion's roar and the human's agitated voices, opened her eyes with difficulty. Pain was a dense fog, but the urgency around her pulled her back to consciousness. She saw Dr. Silva's tense face, the weapon pointed at the lion, and in the distance, the pale figure of her son, Dr. Almeida, observing from inside the SUV, a shadow of regret and powerlessness that now mingled with growing despair. She tried again, with an effort that drained her last reserves, to raise her hand. Her trembling finger pointed to the lion, then to herself, and then, with an almost imperceptible movement, to her son's car. Good. My son." Her voice was a hoarse whisper, almost inaudible, but her eyes pleaded for understanding, for one last attempt at communication. She wanted everyone to know that the lion was her protector and that her son, the man in the car, was the cause of her pain. Toby, the small terrier, sensing his owner's anguish and the growing threat, let out a weak bark, almost a whimper, nestling even closer against the lion's flank. The feline, in turn, lowered its head slightly, a gesture of silent comfort, before raising its gaze again to the humans. Its golden eyes, previously fixed on the police officer, now turned to Dr. Silva, and for a brief moment there was a depth in them, a non-verbal question, almost as if it were pondering the woman's words. With a sudden decision that made the police officer's hearts leap, Dr. Silva did something unexpected. She did not move towards the lion, nor did she try to argue further with the commander. Instead, she slowly knelt on the hot asphalt, a few meters from the lion and the mother. She tossed the tranquilizer dart aside, away from herself, in a gesture of complete surrender and trust. "I trust you, boy," she murmured, her voice low and calm, almost a melody directed at the lion. "I trust you won't hurt us. I understand you're protecting, but she needs help. Let us help her. You are a good protector. Let us take care of her." She spoke as if the lion were a patient, a sentient being, and not just a wild instinct. The police officers, shocked by Dr. Silva's audacity, hesitated. The commander, paralyzed by the surreal scene, watched the unarmed woman kneeling before a lion that had just roared, talking to it as if it were a pet. Suddenly, the lion let out a low sound, a type of moan that was not threatening, but seemed to express deep reluctance. It turned its head to the mother, its golden eyes meeting hers. The mother, feeling the urgency, tried to force a smile, a last effort. "Go, go," she whispered to the lion, an almost imperceptible plea, a final sacrifice so she could be saved. Dr. Almeida in the car felt a knot in his throat. His mother, on the verge of death, was asking a lion to move away so she could receive help, and the lion, the wild beast, seemed to be considering the request. The shame that corroded him transformed into acute pain, a brutal realization of his own insignificance and cruelty. He, the man who had run over his mother, was now witnessing a miracle of animal compassion that shamed him to his very soul. Suddenly, the police commander, losing patience, stepped forward. "Doctor, we cannot risk any longer. The lady is in critical condition. If the animal doesn't move, we'll have to neutralize it." His voice was harsh, authoritative, and the sound of a gun being cocked echoed in the air. The lion, as if understanding the conversation, the sacrifice, the urgency, did the unthinkable. With a deep sigh that seemed to shake its entire body, it moved. Not in retreat, not in flight, but in a slow, deliberate displacement, just enough for Dr. Silva to access the mother. It moved back a step, then another, keeping a safe distance, but still visible, still protective. Its eyes, however, did not waver from Dr. Silva, a silent warning that its permission was conditional and that any sudden movement would be met with the fury of a king. The morning air, previously just tense, now seemed electrified with the possibility of a miracle. The standoff had been broken, not by force, but by trust and silent communication between species. Dr. Silva, with her heart pounding in her chest, knew she had only a few minutes. The elderly woman's life hung by a thread, and the lion, the unlikely guardian, watched every movement, the fate of all in its paws. Time, previously suspended on the tightrope of uncertainty, now accelerated with relentless ferocity. Dr. Silva, her heart pounding in her chest, did not hesitate. Every second was precious, a grain of sand slipping through the hourglass of the elderly woman's life. She moved with the speed and precision of a surgeon, her eyes scanning the mother's body for the most critical injuries. The lion, majestic and motionless, watched every movement, its golden eyes like beacons of an ancient guardian, a constant reminder of the conditional permission it had granted. The asphalt beneath the mother was stained dark red, a slowly expanding pool, a silent testament to the gravity of the situation. Dr. Silva tore the elderly woman's clothing with a swift movement, exposing pale skin and open wounds. An open fracture in her leg, a deep cut on her head, and what appeared to be internal bleeding. Her pulse was weak and irregular, her breathing shallow and gasping. "We need a stretcher, now!" she shouted to the police officers, her voice laden with urgency but without taking her eyes off the patient. "And a full first aid kit. She's losing a lot of blood." The police officers, who had relaxed only a millimeter of their tension, became agitated again. The commander, still with his weapon drawn, but now pointed at the ground, gestured frantically to his men. Two of them ran to the police car, while another tried to make contact with the ambulance, which was still on its way. The tense silence was broken by the sound of hurried footsteps and anxious voices, but the lion remained unperturbed, a living statue of power and vigilance. From inside the SUV, Dr. Almeida watched the scene, a slow and excruciating torture. Dr. Silva, a stranger, acted with the urgency and compassion that he, the son, should have been demonstrating. The lion, a wild beast, was the loyal protector he never was. Every movement of Dr. Silva, every gesture of care, was a stab to his already torn soul. Shame was a poison, spreading through his veins, paralyzing him, making him a mere spectator of his own tragedy. He wanted to scream, he wanted to run, he wanted to do something, anything, but his body was heavy, his mind clouded by guilt and shock. His eyes fixed on his mother, so fragile, so vulnerable, and then on the lion, whose gaze seemed to pierce him, a silent accusation of his failure. Toby, the small terrier, still nestled against the lion's flank, let out a low whimper as if sharing his owner's anguish. The lion, in an almost imperceptible gesture, lowered its head and nuzzled the dog's fur, a silent comfort that only heightened the surreal nature of the scene. Dr. Silva, while applying pressure to one of the mother's most serious wounds, noticed the gesture. It was further proof of the animal's complexity, of the intelligence and empathy that defied all expectations. "Commander," Dr. Silva called, her voice now calmer but still firm, "we need to move her to the ambulance as soon as it arrives, but the lion, it won't allow us to take her from here unless it understands what we're doing." The commander frowned, frustration evident on his face. "Doctor, we can't negotiate with a wild animal. The ambulance is less than 5 minutes away. We don't have time for this." "It's not negotiation, Commander. It's trust," Dr. Silva replied, without taking her eyes off the mother. "He trusted me to get to her. Now he needs to trust that we're taking her to a safe place. If we try to force it, he will react. And she's not in a condition to endure more stress." The stretcher and first aid kit were brought by the police officers, who approached cautiously, their eyes fixed on the lion. Dr. Silva took bandages and gauze, beginning to staunch the bleeding as much as possible. Every touch was delicate, every movement calculated. The mother, with semi-closed eyes, murmured something inaudible, her trembling hand trying to reach the lion's paw. The feline, as if sensing the touch, inclined its head slightly, its golden eyes fixed on her with protective intensity. "I need you to prepare the stretcher right here, beside me," Dr. Silva instructed the police officers, pointing to a space on the asphalt. "Very carefully, no sudden movements and no loud talking." The police officers, reluctant but with no other option, obeyed. The stretcher was positioned, its cold metal reflecting the morning sun. Dr. Silva, with a deep sigh, turned to the lion. Her eyes met its, and she spoke in a low tone, almost a whisper, as if conversing with an intimate friend. "Boy," she began, her voice soft, "she needs to go to the hospital. There they can heal her. It's for her own good. We're going to take her to a place where she'll be safe and well. You've been very brave, very protective. Now let us do the rest." She extended her hand slowly, not to touch it, but in a gesture of openness and trust. "We will take care of her. I promise." The lion watched her, its muscles tense, but its growl had ceased completely. It tilted its head, its eyes seeming to probe the sincerity in her words. The tension in the air was almost unbearable. Every breath of those present seemed amplified. Dr. Almeida, in the car, felt sweat trickle down his forehead, his heart beating erratically. His mother's life, and perhaps the lion's, depended on that moment, on that silent communication between a woman and a beast. Suddenly, the distant sound of a siren broke the silence, growing in intensity. The ambulance was arriving. Time was running out. The lion, hearing the sound, turned its head towards the siren, its eyes narrowing. Dr. Silva knew she had only a few more seconds to gain the animal's cooperation. The next move would be the most critical of all. How would they move the mother to the ambulance? With the lion still there, vigilant and time running against them, the fate of all hung in the air, as uncertain as the roar that could come at any moment. The sound of the siren, previously distant, now tore through the morning air with deafening ferocity. The ambulance, its lights flashing at a frantic pace, appeared around the curve of the road, a white and red blur that promised salvation, but which, to the lion, was just another imminent threat. The feline, which moments before seemed to ponder Dr. Silva's words, turned its head sharply, its golden eyes narrowing into slits of pure distrust. A low, guttural growl escaped its throat, a clear warning that its patience was at its limit. Dr. Silva felt a chill run down her spine. Time had run out. She turned to the police officers, who were already instinctively flinching at the ambulance's approach. "Commander, tell them to turn off the siren and lights, now, and to approach slowly." Her voice was a command, not a request, and the commander, seeing the urgency in the doctor's eyes, gestured frantically to the ambulance driver, who was already beginning to slow down. The siren died in an electronic whine, and the strobe lights ceased, plunging the scene into a tense silence, broken only by the ambulance's engine and the lion's continuous growl. The paramedics, 2 men and a woman, stepped out of the vehicle with their equipment, their faces pale as they saw the surreal scene before them. An injured elderly woman on the ground, a doctor kneeling beside her, and a majestic, but clearly furious, lion a few meters away. What is happening here?" One of the paramedics stammered, his eyes fixed on the lion. "He's protecting the patient," Dr. Silva replied without taking her eyes off the animal. "He allowed me to approach, but any sudden movement, any threat, and he will react. We need to be extremely careful." She turned to the lion again, her voice soft but firm. "Boy, these are my friends. They've come to help, to take Mom to a place where she can heal. They won't hurt her. They will save her." The lion watched her, its muscles tense, ready to attack. Its eyes, once curious, now burned with a wild intensity. Toby, the small terrier, sensing the change in atmosphere, began to tremble, but remained nestled against the lion's flank, as if seeking comfort and protection. From the SUV, Dr. Almeida watched everything with his heart in his throat. Every second was an eternity of agony. He saw Dr. Silva's determination, the bravery of the paramedics who, despite their fear, prepared to act. And he saw the lion, the unlikely guardian who seemed to understand more than anyone could imagine. Shame corroded him, a physical pain that prevented him from moving, from breathing. He, the son, should have been there, but he was a coward, a spectator paralyzed by guilt. "We need more space," Dr. Silva told the paramedics, who were already approaching with the stretcher. "He needs to understand that we are not invading her space. Commander, please ask your men to form a semicircle, keeping a safe distance, but showing that we are all here to help." The commander, still in shock but regaining his composure, gave the orders. The police officers moved slowly, creating a human barrier, but with no weapons drawn, just a calm presence. Dr. Silva then did the unthinkable. She rose slowly, keeping her eyes fixed on the lions, and took a step back, then another, moving slightly away from the mother. The lion followed her with its gaze, its growl diminishing slightly, but still present. Dr. Silva extended her hand again, a gesture of appeasement. "Boy, I trust you. Trust me. They're gonna take her. It's for her own good." The paramedics, under Dr. Silva's watchful eye, began to approach the mother with the stretcher. Every movement was slow, calculated, as if they were walking on eggshells. The lion, however, did not retreat. It merely adjusted its position, standing between the mother and the paramedics, a wall of flesh and fury. "We can't get past him, Doctor," one of the paramedics whispered, fear evident in his voice. Dr. Silva knew that forcing passage would be a disaster. She turned to the lion again, her voice laden with a silent plea. Please, boy. She needs to go. Let us save her. She then looked at the mother, who seemed to be losing consciousness, her breathing growing weaker. Mother, you need to go. Let us help you. The mother, with a last effort, opened her eyes slightly and with an almost inaudible murmur extended her trembling hand towards the lion, a light touch on its paw. The lion, as if an electric shock ran through it, stopped its growl. It looked at the elderly woman's fragile hand, then at her almost closed eyes. A strange sound escaped its throat, a whimper that was not threatening, but of deep sadness, of a reluctance to part. With a sigh that seemed to empty all the air from its lungs, the lion did the unthinkable. It moved, not away, but to the side, opening a small, but crucial, space between the mother and itself. It sat down majestic and vigilant, but the physical barrier had been removed. Its eyes, however, did not stray from the mother, not for a second. Now! Dr. Silva shouted, her voice laden with urgency and relief. Very carefully. 1, 2, 3. The paramedics, with the help of one of the police officers, lifted the mother with the utmost delicacy, placing her on the stretcher. The lion watched every movement, its golden eyes fixed on the elderly woman, as if imprinting every detail into its memory. Toby, the terrier, let out a low bark, as if saying goodbye. Dr. Silva quickly placed a cervical collar on the mother and began monitoring her vital signs, while the paramedics stabilized the open fracture and stemmed the bleeding. She has to go to the hospital as quickly as possible, she said, her voice tense. Internal bleeding is a serious concern. The stretcher, with the mother aboard, was carefully carried towards the ambulance. The lion, with a slow and deliberate movement, stood up and began to follow. Not running, not attacking, but walking at a respectful distance, its eyes fixed on the stretcher. He's following us, one of the paramedics whispered, panic returning. Let him, Dr. Silva replied, her voice calm. He needs to see that she's safe. He is her guardian. The stretcher was slid into the ambulance. Dr. Silva entered right after, without hesitation, to continue treatment. The paramedics closed the rear doors, and the lion, seeing the mother disappear, let out a deep roar, a lament that echoed down the road. It slammed its paw on the ground, a demonstration of frustration and loss, but did not try to prevent their departure. Dr. Almeida, in the SUV, watched the ambulance depart, the lion roaring in its wake, and his mother, his own mother, being taken away by strangers, protected by a beast. The final scene etched itself into his mind. The lion, majestic and solitary, watching the ambulance disappear on the horizon, a guardian who had fulfilled its promise, while he, the son, remained immobilized, a monument to his own cowardice and negligence. The lion's roar was not just a sound, it was an accusation, a brutal reminder of all he had lost, of all he had failed to be. His mother's fate, now in the hands of Dr. Silva and medicine, was uncertain, but the fate of his own soul was sealed by that image of abandonment and animal redemption. The roar of the ambulance engine mingled with the lion's roar, a dissonant chorus that tore through the morning's quiet. But as the white and red blur diminished on the horizon, the sound of the siren faded, carrying with it the promise of healing and the mother's presence. The lion's roar, once a lament of loss, transformed into something deeper, more primal, an accusation that echoed not just down the road, but directly into Dr. Almeida's soul. He stood there, paralyzed, a monument to his own cowardice, while the lion, the wild beast, had risen as the true guardian. The image of his mother being taken away, protected by an animal he had condemned, burned in his mind. Shame was a poison running through his veins, more potent than any physical pain. He felt cold sweat trickle down his temples, his heart beating an erratic rhythm against his ribs, a drumbeat of guilt. Outside, the lion remained. Its golden eyes, previously fixed on the disappearing ambulance, now swept the empty road, as if searching for something it could no longer find. It let out one last roar, a sound that seemed to tear the very earth, and then, with deliberate slowness, began to walk. Not away, not into the forest from which it had come, but in a tight circle around the spot where the mother had lain. Each step was heavy, each movement laden with a wild melancholy. Toby, the small terrier, who had nestled so bravely beside the lion, now visibly trembled, his low, whimpering barks accompanying the feline's silent mourning. He seemed to understand the absence, the loss. The police officers, who had maintained a respectful distance, now exchanged glances, uncertain. The immediate crisis had passed, but the threat or presence of the lion remained. One of the officers, the commander, made a cautious gesture to his men, indicating that they should hold their position, but without provoking. No one dared to approach the lion, which seemed to have become the center of a particular universe of pain and vigilance. Inside the SUV, Almeida watched everything as if trapped in a nightmare. The scene replayed in his mind. The impact, the blood, the lion appearing out of nowhere, the sacrifice. He, the son, the man who prided himself on his control, on his reason, had been reduced to a powerless spectator. The lion, on the other hand, had acted by instinct, by a loyalty that transcended human understanding. It was a brutal lesson, seared into his consciousness. Almeida's breathing became shallow, the air seemed thin. He smelled blood, wet earth fear, and then a new sensation began to emerge, pushing past the paralysis. It wasn't courage, not yet. It was an overwhelming need to confront himself, the lion, the truth of that moment. He could no longer hide. The image of the lion walking in circles seemed to call to him, to challenge him. With an effort that seemed to move mountains, Almeida reached his trembling hand for the door handle. His fingers were cold, but a newly ignited spark of determination began to warm them. The door creaked slightly as it unlocked, a sound that seemed deafening in the tense silence. The lion, a few meters away, sharply raised its head, its golden eyes fixing on the SUV. A low growl, almost inaudible, escaped its throat, a warning. Almeida ignored it. He pushed the door, which opened with a slight creak, revealing the scene in all its rawness. The morning air, previously fresh and invigorating, now felt heavy, laden with tragedy. He felt the ground beneath his feet, gravity pulling him into reality. Every muscle in his body protested, but he forced himself out of the vehicle, one step at a time. His eyes met the lion's. There was no longer the blind fury of the first moment, nor Dr. Silva's curiosity. There was an intensity, a vigilance that pierced his soul. The lion didn't move, it just watched him, as if evaluating every fiber of his being. Toby, seeing Almeida, let out a stronger bark, a mix of recognition and fear, and cowered even closer to the lion. Almeida took a step forward, then another, his eyes fixed on the animals. He didn't know what he was doing, what he expected. Perhaps redemption, perhaps punishment. He felt the police officer's gaze on him, the palpable tension in the air. But nothing mattered beyond that moment, that silent confrontation with the wild majesty that had exposed his own insignificance. He stood there, a broken man, before a beast that had proven more human than himself. The lion, the guardian, the silent accuser, was now the mirror of his soul. And Almeida knew with cold certainty that his destiny was intrinsically linked to that of the animal, and that the journey to his own salvation began at that exact moment under the relentless gaze of the golden eyes. What would happen next? He had no idea. But flight was no longer an option. He had finally stepped out of the shadows of his car, onto the stage of his own tragedy and perhaps of his redemption. The lion, The guardian, the accuser, was now his judge, and the verdict, he knew, would be relentless. The morning air, previously fresh and invigorating, now felt heavy, laden with tragedy and a deafening quiet. Every muscle in Almeida's body protested, but he forced himself out of the vehicle, one step at a time, as if emerging from a tomb into a world he no longer recognized. The creak of the SUV door, a trivial sound, echoed like thunder in his mind, announcing his arrival on the stage of his own ruin. Suddenly, the lion let out a low roar, not of fury, but of a deep and ancestral melancholy. The sound vibrated in the air, running down Almeida's spine, not as a threat, but as a lament, an echo of the pain everyone there felt, and of the pain Almeida had caused. Toby, startled, cowered even closer, but did not flee from the lion. The roar seemed to break the spell of silence, and the police officers stirred, their gazes fixing on the animal, then on Almeida. Almeida, in turn, felt the roar in his chest, in his bones. It was not a sound to intimidate, but to awaken. It was the voice of nature, of undeniable truth. He closed his eyes for an instant, and when he opened them, a new determination, cold and resolute, had ignited in his gaze. He could no longer hide. He could no longer flee. He had been judged, and now he needed to accept the sentence. With a deep sigh, Almeida took another step, this time not hesitant, but firm. He didn't know what he would do, but he knew he needed to approach, to confront the beast that had shown him the mirror of his own soul. The lion did not retreat, it merely watched, its golden eyes fixed as if waiting. The tension in the air was almost unbearable, a stretched thread about to snap. The commander raised his hand, signaling his men to prepare, but still without firing. It was a standoff, a moment suspended in time, where the law of the jungle and the law of men collided, and the fate of a rich man lay in the paws of a lion. Almeida advanced, each step a silent confession, a sacrifice imposed by his own soul. The asphalt beneath his feet seemed to burn, not from the rising sun, but from the scorching weight of his guilt. His eyes, once obscured by shock and denial, now burned with painful clarity, a sharp vision of the truth he had tried to avoid. He saw the lion no longer as a wild threat, but as a relentless mirror, reflecting the distorted image of his own humanity, the face of a man who had failed. The animal's melancholic roar still echoed in his ears, a funeral song for the life he had almost destroyed and for the soul he had corrupted. He smelled blood, earth, fear, but also, strangely, the smell of raw, naked truth. The lion, a golden sphinx beneath the sky that lightened in shades of lavender and orange, did not move. Its eyes, pools of liquid gold, showed neither fury nor pity, only a deep, ancestral observation that seemed to penetrate the innermost layers of Almeida's being. It was as if time had stopped, and only the animal's gentle breathing and Almeida's frantic heartbeat existed in a dissonant duet. Toby, still nestled between the lion's paws, raised his head, his wet snout pointing towards Almeida. A low whimper escaped the small dog, a lament that mixed newfound loyalty to the lion and an innate fear of the approaching figure. The lion, with an almost imperceptible movement of its head, nuzzled Toby, a comforting gesture that brutally contrasted with the image of a wild predator, but reinforced its role as guardian. Behind Almeida, the commander broke into a cold sweat. His hand was still on his holster, fingers clenched around the gun's grip, but paralyzed by an inexplicable reverence. His men, spread in a tense semicircle, kept their weapons pointed, but no one dared to fire. It was a surreal scene, something out of a nightmare or an ancient legend, where the boundaries of reality dissolved. A man, a lion, a dog, and the thin line between civilization and savagery that threatened to break at any moment. The commander knew that a single wrong move, a single sound, could unleash a tragedy. But what to do? Shoot the lion, the protector, the guardian, or let Almeida approach a wild animal that could at any moment decide that the judgment was over and the sentence would be executed. The uncertainty was a poison that paralyzed everyone. Almeida stopped a few meters from the lion. The distance was so small that he could feel the heat emanating from the animal's body, could see every strand of its golden mane, every scar on its skin, marks of battles he could never comprehend. He raised his hand again, this time not in supplication, but in a gesture of acceptance, of total surrender. He didn't know what he expected, but flight was no longer an option. He had reached his limit, the point of no return, and the lion was his only compass. The lion, in response, did something unexpected. It didn't roar, it didn't growl. It simply moved its head slowly, its golden eyes fixed on Almeida's, and then, with surprising delicacy for a creature of such power, gently nudged Toby out from between its paws. The small dog, confused, looked at the lion, then at Almeida, and then, hesitantly, took a step towards its former owner. Toby, with a low whimper, began to walk towards Almeida, his tail wagging timidly. It was a slow, uncertain movement, as if the dog was torn between its newfound loyalty to the lion and the memory of its master. Almeida felt a pang in his chest as he saw his dog, the same one he had run over, now approaching him, coming from the side of the beast that had protected it. There was a searing pain in his heart, a pain that was not physical, but of the soul. It was the pain of betrayal, of negligence, of cowardice, now amplified by the silent forgiveness of an animal. He knelt slowly, extending his hand to Toby, his eyes welling up. The lion observed the scene with the same unwavering intensity. Its eyes did not stray from Almeida, even when Toby finally reached the man and began to lick his hand, a gesture of forgiveness that Almeida felt he did not deserve. It was a forgiveness that burned more than any accusation. The lion then, with a slow and majestic movement, stood up. There was no haste, no aggression, just the imposing presence of a predator at the peak of its power. The police officers, seeing the lion standing, held their breath. The commander tightened his grip on his holster, ready to give the order, but something in the lion's behavior, an almost human dignity, made him hesitate, freezing him in place. The lion took a step, then another. Not towards Almeida, but to the side, towards the road. It looked at the bloodstain on the asphalt, a last reminder of the violence it had witnessed, then at Almeida, and then, with a final gaze that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 years of wisdom and suffering, it turned away. Without a roar, without a growl, without a single sound to break the solemnity of the moment, the lion began to walk slowly towards the forest. Its golden mane swayed gently with its movement, and in a few seconds the majestic creature disappeared into the dense vegetation, as silently as it had appeared, leaving behind a deafening vacuum and the reverberation of its presence. The silence that followed was deeper than any sound. The lion had left. It had left Almeida, not with physical punishment, but with the unbearable weight of his own conscience and the silent forgiveness of a wild animal that had proven nobler than any man. Toby, still licking Almeida's hand, seemed to be the only link to the unreality that had just unfolded. Almeida, kneeling on the asphalt, felt the sun on his face, the wind in his hair, and the cold of loneliness in his soul. He had been confronted by nature, judged by the wild, and left behind to face the consequences of his own actions. The lion had fulfilled its role. Now Almeida's journey, the true journey to redemption, began. He was no longer the rich, untouchable man. He was just a man, broken but perhaps finally awakened. The verdict had been given. Life, with all its pains and responsibilities, was his sentence. And he, for the first time in a long time, was ready to accept it, the scar of that encounter etched forever into his soul. The road, once the stage of his tragedy, now stretched before him, an uncertain but inevitable path. The silence that followed the lion's departure was not a relief, but a deafening vacuum. It was as if the air had been sucked from the world, leaving only the echo of absence, the weight of revelation. Almeida, still kneeling on the warm asphalt, felt the rising sun on his face, but the light brought no warmth, only a cold, relentless clarity. Toby, his small body trembling, continued to lick his master's hand, a gesture of forgiveness that burned more than any accusation, an absolution Almeida felt he did not deserve. The man's eyes, once tear-filled, were now dry, fixed on the dark stain on the asphalt where the lion had been, and then in the direction of the forest, as if he could still glimpse the golden tail disappearing among the trees. The commander, who had kept his hand on his holster for so long, finally lowered it, a heavy sigh escaping his lips. His men, like statues coming to life, relaxed slightly, but the tension still hung in the air, an invisible mist of disbelief and shock. No one dared to speak. No one dared to break the spell the lion had cast over that stretch of road. The law of men, for a brief and eternal instant, had bowed to the law of the jungle, and the verdict had been delivered not by a court, but by a wild creature. Almeida, with an effort that seemed to move mountains, finally raised his head. His eyes swept the scene, no longer with the panic of a cornered man, but with the sobriety of someone who had seen the raw, naked truth. He saw his mother, still motionless, protected by the thermal blanket, the paramedics still working with silent urgency. He saw the police officers, their weapons lowered, their faces marked by perplexity, and he saw Toby, his faithful companion, who he had run over and then protected by a beast, and now, inexplicably, forgave him. A searing pain, deeper than any physical wound, pierced his chest. It was the pain of guilt, of negligence, of cowardice. But strangely, there was also a glimmer of hope, a seed of redemption. The lion had not punished him with its claws, but with the truth. It had shown him the abyss of his own soul, and upon leaving, had left him the responsibility to climb out of it. The commander, regaining his composure, finally approached. His steps were cautious, as if he still feared the lion might reappear at any moment. He stopped a few meters from Almeida, his eyes fixed on the kneeling man. "Mr. Almeida," the commander's voice was hoarse, almost a whisper. "We need to take you in. There are many questions to be answered." Almeida did not react with anger or denial. He merely nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the commander's face. There was no more resistance in him, just a somber acceptance. He knew that the law of men would have its turn, and he was ready to face it. The arrest, the trial, the conviction, all of it seemed insignificant compared to the tribunal he had just faced, to the verdict he had received from the lion. With a deep sigh, Almeida tried to stand, but his legs trembled. Toby, as if sensing his master's weakness, jumped into his lap, his small body offering unexpected support. Almeida hugged him, feeling the dog's warmth and unconditional loyalty. A balm for his wounded soul. "My mother." Almeida's voice was a thread, almost inaudible. "How is she?" The commander hesitated, then pointed to the paramedics. "They're doing their best. She's being stabilized for transport. It's serious, but there's hope." The word hope echoed in Almeida's heart, a fragile melody amidst the chaos. He clung to it, the only light in his darkness. If his mother survived, if Toby forgave him, perhaps, just perhaps, he could find a way back. Two police officers approached, their expressions serious. They extended their hands to help Almeida stand. He accepted the help, his movements slow and deliberate. Toby, still in his arms, looked at the police officers with suspicion, but did not growl. As he was led to the police car, Almeida cast one last look at the road, at the spot where the lion had been. The blood stain was still there, a vivid reminder of the tragedy, But now he saw something more. He saw the thin line between life and death, between civilization and savagery, between guilt and redemption. He had been a blind man, trapped in his own wealth and arrogance, but the lion, the guardian, the judge, had torn the scales from his eyes. The police car door opened, and Almeida got in, still holding Toby. The outside world seemed distant, unreal. He knew he would face a legal storm, that his reputation would be destroyed, that his life would never be the same. But for the first time in a long time, Almeida felt he was on the right path. The lion had given him a second chance, not to escape, but to confront, to become a better man. As the police car drove away, the sun climbed higher in the sky, painting the horizon with shades of gold and promise. The road, once the stage of his tragedy, now stretched before him, an uncertain but inevitable path. The scar of that encounter, the mark of the golden eyes, would be etched forever into his soul, a constant reminder that true wealth lay not in possessions, but in humanity, in compassion, and in the courage to face oneself. Almeida's journey, the true journey to redemption, had only just begun. And he, for the first time in a long time, was ready to walk it step by step under the silent gaze of a lion that had taught him the true meaning of life.